Hello. I do prefer to talk down here than up there. Forgive me if I pace around, I'll try not to. Can you all hear me down there?
Yes.
That's a relief. Still got those theatre credentials working. Thank you very much for welcoming me here. Start with a couple of apologies. So the first one is, if you came along expecting a rich, dark Scottish accent, I'm afraid you're disappointed, because I am originally from New Zealand. I've lived in Scotland for over 30 years, but somehow it hasn't brushed off very much. But oddly, when I'm in New Zealand, people tend to say that I have an English or a Scottish accent, and when I'm in Scotland, they say, "Oh, you're an Australian, aren't you?" Or occasionally a Canadian, and the more discerning know where I'm really from. And the other apology is, although you're not getting the Scottish accent, this is about as close as you get. I managed to dig out the tartan shirt. And then I had this vague memory that the last time I was in Wellington, which was a year ago, and I met with Eric, I think I was wearing the same shirt, which is it maybe gives the wrong impression. But you're also getting the wild hair, because I've just spent 4 weeks in a theatre doing a project with young people in Auckland, and had no time to go out and get a haircut. And I got up this morning and I thought, I'm doing this presentation at the National Library, and that. So this is about as Scottish as you get, the slightly getting towards the Billy Connolly kind of hair. So I'm originally from Wellington. I grew up here, left when I was 18. I've lived in a variety of places. I was in London and Aberdeen, and then Edinburgh. And the first part of my career, about half of my working life, was as a primary school teacher and then manager. And then my family and I came to live in New Zealand in 2004, and we were here for about 4 years. And I worked at Auckland University as a drama teacher trainer. And since then, since we returned to Scotland for the last 12 years, I have spent about 2/3 of my time in Scotland working with the stuff I'm going to talk to you about, and the other third back here in New Zealand, continuing to do theatre education stuff such as these projects in Auckland. So that's my kind of, that's my background, that's where I'm talking from. So I'm not an archivist, I'm an educator, and I got drawn into working in archives through, as you do, a couple of friends. Got back to Scotland, wasn't really sure what I was going to do next, and one of my friends got in touch from the National Archives in Edinburgh and said, could you help us put some education materials together? And it all kind of snowballed from there. So now I work freelance, and my main contract in Scotland is with the Scottish Council on Archives. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about them, and then I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the resources that I work on using archive material in that role, and then some of the projects which I've been involved in the last few years, which use archives in schools and community projects. So Scottish Council on Archives is a Scottish government-funded organisation, and its role is purely to support the archives sector in Scotland. We are tasked with promoting the use of archives and promoting the support of archives in local communities, training archivists in new and important areas. The SCA is also responsible for the accreditation of archive services in Scotland, so they have to reach a certain level. The public or private archive has to reach a certain standard of conservation and of education and outreach and of various other kind of record-keeping things in order to get accreditation. So we manage that program. And about 8 years ago, we branched into education and outreach. This was sort of a pet project by one of the trustees who thought that archive services in Scotland, as probably here, are tasked with a certain public engagement role. And most archive services in Scotland were run by a lone archivist with not another archivist for 60 miles in any direction. And they were expected to run an education and outreach program as well as all of the other things that they were doing. And people who account for these services, particularly counsellors, local councillors and MPs and so on, tend to judge these public services on footfall and on numbers, metrics of various kinds. And archives were just not generating these numbers. And sometimes they were only there because there was a legislative need for them to be there. So we embarked on an education thing, which was this. I got drafted in as a consultant to run a couple of pilot projects, which turned into 6 pilot projects, where we took a local archive and a school somewhere in Scotland, and we put them together and we created a project. And the idea was to then assess how did that project go, who contributed what, and what was thrown up that explained why there was not this kind of engagement.